This episode is presented by Playback, the Canadian film and TV industry's top source for business news and analysis. Visit playbackonline.ca for industry updates.
Canadian film and TV is at a crossroads. More talent than ever, but fewer doors open. How do diverse creators cut through the noise, get their projects greenlit by the decision makers, all without compromising the culture integrity of their story? On the DOV Elevate Podcast, we sit down with two guests who strategically navigated the pitfalls, the breakthroughs, and the mountaintop moments. The industry is shifting because culture isn't just a backdrop. It needs to be the lead. And it's time this industry treats Canadian stories as the rule, not the exception.
Thank you so much for joining us. I'm your host, Vanessa Mitchell, and I'm also the producer of BAMF Special Programs. Today, I'm joined with two filmmakers who create the kind of projects that are as challenging to make as they are impossible to ignore. Brishkay Ahmed and Devlin. Welcome to the DOV Podcast, guys.
Hello. Hi.
Hello.
Thanks for having me. And
Hi.
it's nice to see Sean here too.
Hello. Yeah. Thank you.
All right. So, Brishkay, you were born in Afghanistan, and Sean, you grew up as second generation Filipino Chinese Canadian in Vancouver. Both your families, I should say, carry political histories that many Canadians may not know. At what point did you realize that those histories weren't a burden, they were the material?
Sean, do you want to take this on first?
Yeah. So my mom came from the Philippines in the 70s during the Marcos dictatorship. So she came to this country for political reasons. And one of the stories of hers that I most admired as a child was she had been invited on a student scholarship, and so was at the University of Alberta and able to, pay her bills and go to school, essentially subsidized by the Canadian government. And at one point, I think in her first or second year in the country, the South African cricket team came to Edmonton to play a cricket match. And this was during apartheid times. And she joined a group of students who just ran out on the cricket field and interrupted the match and started digging up the field because they felt that it was, wrong that the South African team should be here without question. And in doing that, she really risked everything that had, allowed her to be in this country. And she did it for people in a country that she had never met. And so, that was my mom, and that's who I grew up with. So it makes me a bit emotional because she passed around this time of year, and it was Mother's Day recently.
I'm sorry.
But, yeah.
But she sounds like a phenomenal woman.
So that was my mom. That's who I grew up with. She was my hero. And it's kind of always been hard for me to separate these things that I guess are usually separated, but that's never really made much sense to me.
And what about for you, Brishkay?
Well, first of all, Sean, you had a great mom. That's amazing. She sounds like a great protagonist herself. For myself, because I was born in Afghanistan, and, since the 1970s, Afghanistan has been sort of the breaking news story across the globe. And being the daughter of a diplomat, I've always sort of mixed and mingled with Western leaders, crossed paths with them in my life. So the East and the West have always kind of intermingled in my life. And when I came to Canada at 12 years old, still Afghanistan was on the news, and I'm now married to a man from Iran, and Iran is in the news. So I feel like my identity has always been deeply mixed with geopolitics and the geopolitical issues that the global world is connected to. It's not just one nation, right? It's East, West, red, blue. So I understand that the story of being an immigrant or a refugee from a war-torn country, being from Afghanistan and also linked to Iran, it's actually the world's story. So I'm not that separated at all, because so many Canadians participated inside Afghanistan, the rebuilding phase, and helped try to make that country better. A lot of lives were lost internationally as well. And for positive and sinister reasons, international agencies and countries have always been involved in the region of Afghanistan, Pakistan, and Iran. So, so it's not just my story, it's the world's story.
Okay. When did you each realize that the lane the industry wanted to put you in wasn't big enough, and that the stories you were trying to tell needed both forms of documentary and scripted to be fully told? And Brishkay, I'll start with you on that.
Yeah. Sadly, I think about 15 years ago when I started just wanting to work in the industry as and at that time as a writer, I found that the room was too small. And I think it had to do with how I presented myself as an Afghan woman. I think that because at that time in the news, all you saw was a certain type of an Afghan woman. And there were very, very few Afghan people in the film and television industry in Canada in general at that time. So I wouldn't say that I wasn't welcomed, but the door wasn't open and the room felt too small rather than, anything else. So I did what I thought I could do, and I went back to Afghanistan to do the work that I wanted to do, because coming as an expat there, a lot of more doors opened, a lot more spaces were offered to bring in that insight because of the Western influence at that time inside Afghanistan. So I kind of just pivoted, regionally.
Okay. And then for you, Sean?
I think there was some similarity there. So I had family who, lost a home, I guess about 15, 16 years ago during a typhoon in the Philippines. And that just became something that I really wanted to tell stories about, was the impacts of climate change in the Philippines. And when I tried to do that, it was really hard to find lanes in Canada to do that work in the Philippines because it wasn't considered Canadian enough. And so I had to kind of get creative about finding ways to be able to classify that work as Canadian, sometimes by, including fictional Canadian characters who are interacting with real people in the Philippines. A lot of that was necessitated by the fact that this kind of lane didn't exist.
And I'm thinking now of you both answering this question. How has that changed now for you? Has that changed for you now, to make now these stories in Canada?
Mm-hmm.
Is there a difference? Has it gotten better?
I think so. I think in the past 5 years. I don't know what it is about the pandemic that happened, but it certainly had people reflecting on life choices. I think coming face to face with the understanding that our humanity could just die, to be completely honest, brought some humanity in people. And we were a little bit more interested because we were so isolated for so long that we were suddenly more curious about other people. I think streamers also helped because the different languages of content and programming became available for people. So now the world was, in our laptops and our phones. We're not like stuck to the TV hour programming that, is very controlled. That helped a lot. And then I would say programs like this, right? Like Netflix Dove, Rogers BSO, Black Screen Office, Real World, all these great efforts has made a big difference and opened doors and allowed us, people like myself at least, to walk in and say, like, this is how I am. Like, take the shit or not. Like, that's it.
I love that.
Totally. I agree with the timing around the pandemic. I'm not saying this in jest, it's not a joke, but I saw a filmmaker recently saying that a lot of us should probably be crediting George Floyd as an executive producer on our work in the last few years. It's not a joke if it seems like I'm being light there, but I think around the time of the pandemic and specifically the murder of George Floyd, you saw a lot of stakeholders in this industry suddenly having the kind of realizations that you're mentioning there, Brishkay. And I see it. I saw a distinct change, I think, at that time.
It's very interesting that you mentioned that, and it isn't a joke. And especially within the Black community, the arts Black community, we felt that Whether that's still happening now, though, I don't know if the window is still open to that. So that's interesting that an incident definitely shifted it. But maybe sort of the next question is, well, it's not a trend for us as Black people. We don't feel like our work and who we are is a trend, but was that a trend, you know? But political storytelling and I guess entertainment have always been treated, I guess, in separate conversations in the industry very often. Like one is considered serious and the other is considered maybe more commercial. Both of you have spent your careers, proving that that's false, especially in your content. Where did that instinct come from? And was it something, you arrived at just intellectually, or did a specific project, teach you that entertainment was actually most powerful political tool? Sean, do you want to start with that?
Yeah, sure. So I'm a stand-up comedian. I've been doing stand-up comedy for over 20 years now. And so in stand-up comedy, it's actually, not quite so separate. So I had the benefit growing up of, looking up to comedians like Richard Pryor and Chris Rock, for whom comedy and politics are just intertwined. That was their voice. Not to say that they were always being political. Sometimes they're just being observational or personal, but they can go into politics with ease. And so that was just a really strong example for me that I feel like I've endeavored to try to carry over into film. And then another one that's more serious was just as an adult becoming familiar with the work of Augusto Boal of the Theater of the Oppressed, and this history of, basically making theater with real people whose lived realities are undeniably political, and engaging them in the art of, crafting fictions out of those realities. And there's such a rich history of that. Specifically with Boal in Brazil, that's been so influential to how I've made these hybrid films.
Amazing. It's so interesting that you mentioned the comedians, because I think of Dave Chappelle, who's, kind of a current person that does that very well, that balance. Hey, Brishkay, what about for you?
Like Sean, by the way, I did see Sean's skit on the stealing of the jobs, and I thought that was really political and funny.
Okay, thanks.
That was a good one. Yeah. Honestly, everything is political. Like, I don't know what is not political. Like, honestly, like signing up for my daughter's swim classes is political, okay? Like, PAC meetings are political. What we decide to wear is political. What we do with our body, like, everything is political. And that's why, like, humor is the best way to come at it. It's because it awakens us. And when we laugh about it, as Sean said, we see the absurdity of some of our political choices, So for me, I've always viewed everything as political. But again, that might just have been shaped by my upbringing, in a home that is constantly related to diplomacy, geopolitics. And there's nothing like if I go to a grocery store and I decide that I want to buy this or that, that's a political choice. It's an economical choice that is linked to politics. So I don't see any separation. But that's why I think that and politician and the political landscape, when we think about it, is quite funny. I mean, the people in it that navigate that world, they're quite absurd and, like characteristics are odd. The Simpsons is political, like all these things.
Yeah, they tend to live in their own world in a way, I guess, politicians, right?
Yeah, there's nothing more entertaining than the current regime that sits in the U.S., right?
Yes. We won't even get started on that, but we all know. We all watch it and feel it. And speaking of political figures, Sean, in 2015, you disguised yourself in a blazer and got invited on stage behind the Prime Minister, Stephen Harper, and revealed a shirt critical of his immigration policies. What was that moment, like scripted in your mind or before it happened, or did it, go exactly as you had planned?
It didn't go as planned. I mean, part of the context there that's a bit absurd is that I had actually already done that less than a year before to the same prime minister at that time, I disguised myself as a waiter and did that with a friend. And so it was less than a year later, and we were doing that. So I decided to change the disguise a bit and wear the blazer. And so I was just in this holding area where you could basically sign up to try to attend one of his speeches. And what was I doing? I was just eating free muffins and like hoping that I would be allowed to get into this speech. And I thought, I could maybe ask a pointed question or something like that. And then ironically enough, I think because they wanted to make their, party seem a bit more diverse, they started going through the waiting room looking for people who weren't white or people who were maybe a bit younger to stand on stage behind the prime minister to, make his base of support look more diverse. And so I was wondering if I would just even get in the room, and then they invited me on stage. And so, I mean, that was funny that that was their own choice to bring me up there. But yeah, so that part definitely wasn't planned.
Wow.
Banff World Media Festival thanks its DOV Elevate partner, the Indigenous Screen Office. ISO supports First Nations, Inuit, and Métis creators across Canada, fostering narrative sovereignty, cultural revitalization, and Indigenous storytelling on all platforms through advocacy and funding. Find out more at iso-bea.ca.
And when that definitely backfired on them.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah.
Let's get the guy in the back with the bran muffin to come up.
Exactly. Wow, that's
Nice.
awesome. I feel like even though, it wasn't planned, it seemed like it was better than you would have planned for it, right? So, okay, Brishkay, you did a scripted television in Kabul, in an active conflict zone. What did that experience teach you about, the power of scripted storytelling that documentary alone, I guess, couldn't deliver?
I mean, Afghanistan, because the content the audience is important, right? And that primetime series, which was like a legal police drama, the audience was Afghan people. So a documentary is not going to land because their everyday life is a chaotic documentary unfolding. So it just, that's their world. So my goal really was to try and empower women and girls there. But the way to empower women and girls is to make sure that men turn the TV on and allow the women around them to watch a certain programming at 9 p.m. prime time when it's their dinner time. So they control the remote. So I knew that if I wanted to educate the men about women having jobs, working as judges, journalists, police officers, and things like that, the show would have to meet the male audience's need, which is big stakes, cars blowing up, guns, all that, so that the Afghans themselves can see themselves as heroic, like the American soldiers kind of hero. So I worked with a company and we did that. And then we inserted roles for women and we inserted character traits when the men would drive the woman to work, pick her up from work, congratulate her when she graduated. Subtle, little subliminal, full-on propaganda. I was aware of it, but I don't mind writing that kind of propaganda because it serves a good purpose. But that did impact. It did. It slowly trickles, right? Because it's a more softer, subconscious way of dropping messages, kind of like advertising.
Definitely dropping messages, but also just intentionally influencing, how people. Activism, I feel like, in a form for women, right?
Yes.
Oh, love that.
Yeah.
Love that. That is amazing. And it's just smart.
One of
really
my best
smart,
traits.
intelligent way to do it. Okay, Sean, for your film Asag, it debuted at the 2023 Tribeca Film Festival and does something also daring, like Brishka, and it places fictional Canadian characters inside a real political tragedy in the Philippines. But you're blending documentary, scripted, within the same film. What does fiction give a political documentary that a straight doc also can? Kind of similar what I was asking Brishka. And how did you convince your collaborators that it would work?
So the two Canadian collaborators, they're comedians, improvisers who are in the film you're referring to. I've been working with them for about 10 years, so we just had a level of trust. And to be honest, we trusted each other, and I don't know if we knew it would work. But we trusted each other. For the folks in the Philippines, similarly, I had been making documentaries with this particular family for several years. So we also had this deep level of trust. In terms of like what you get out of it, I love this. Hitchcock has this quote of, I don't make slices of life, I make slices of cake. And I'm thinking of that as I hear you describing your work, Brishkay, to maybe put more icing in there for the men to tune in, right? These two films I've made in the Philippines, these are micro budget films, so I feel in the end, I don't know yet that they're like slices of cake. I think I'm more in the, they're like those granola bars with some chocolate on them. Maybe that's where I got to with those projects. I'm hoping in the future to work with more resources and aspire to make something more like cake. I'm talking about food a lot. I think I might be hungry. But I also think about like cooking. I do love to cook, and so sometimes when you're making something really spicy, and if some folks can't handle the spice, a common thing you'll find in many different cultures is like cutting it with some sort of cream, right? And it kind of softens the bite. But what I find in the film is that people will remain more open to more intense truths if you have those other layers in there. So I actually think that they don't contradict each other, that actually you can be more politically spicy, so to speak, if you have these other elements in it that lighten it a bit. At least that's been my experience.
That's a great metaphor. Yeah, to visually see that. That makes sense. Sean, we should come see your stand-up sometime because you're quite funny.
Sure, thank you.
And I think your granola sounds better than the cake on a hike. Nobody wants to
right.
cake on a hike. The granola is perfect. Filmmaking is like a hike.
So would you say that a lot of your life, like legitimate question, of things that you have an idea and you want to go for it, and you kind of set out to do it, but you don't have like a full plan? Because that seemed like that happened with the prime minister, and then with you describing this film. Is that kind of your method, Sean?
I mean, definitely. I think certainly when you're working with like at a micro budget level, right? So on these two films I've made, we're working with a crew of about 5-6 people. It really is like making, a very thrifty documentary. And then we're working in the Philippines. I mean, both of these films that I've made in the last 10 years, the production mostly happened during the course of Roger Duterte's presidency. So, I mean, maybe some folks still don't know who he is, but if you don't, he's now officially a war criminal, and he's locked up in The Hague for, committing a war, quote unquote war on drugs, during which time about 30,000 Filipinos were, executed extrajudiciously. So we were working in a country where you're not really supposed to be doing this kind of political work, especially work that's critical of the current government. And so you just have to be open to things changing, to not being able to get a location that you want. And then when you're working with real people, life just happens, right? Like life happens in a different way when people don't have, the comforts and the privileges that a lot of us take for granted in the West. And so you just have to be open to things changing in the middle of a day, or literally in the middle of a scene. And you have to be open to welcoming that and not fighting it.
Wow. Yeah, that answers it for sure. I guess even if you think about the whole journey of filmmaking or even making a series, there's so many different things that can change and shift. So, I mean, that's a great attitude and perspective to have, really. So Brishkay, we're going to turn it back to you. In The Rumbling Belly of Motherhood, which captured female journalists of Zan TV in real time as the Taliban takeover was unfolding in 2021. When you were filming the female journalist, were you already thinking about how the scripted form could carry, parts of that story that, again, documentary maybe couldn't?
No, because I was very focused on that being specifically a documentary, because that's what it was sort of like commissioned for, right? But whenever you're filming a documentary, really everybody is a human in front of you, but they do become inspiration for characters in the fiction side, right? Because you fall in love with them. I mean, you spend so much time with people. And if you really like someone, if you really like their character, they're intriguing, they'll remain with you. So one of those young women showed me just how much she was seeking to one day to be a powerful woman, to just not be a victim, to be a woman that could walk into any room, in any space, get what she wants, and she was a real hustler. So she became a motivation for State of Play, right? The series that I'm working on right now, which is a comedy. But when I was sitting with a friend of mine at a patio, we're just having a beer chatting. And I said, you know what, I think I want to write her character into a comedy and make her into like an Afghan woman that comes to the U.S. with the goal of becoming the first lady. And my friend laughed and was like, oh yeah, but would that really happen? And I said, well, Melania Trump did it. Why would a smart, savvy bitch from Afghanistan not be able to do it?
I love that.
With us.
Would you say that some of your personality is like that? I feel like you give the vibe that you could walk into a room and, all eyes are on you.
You know what? It's not like Brishkay. It's my time with military.
Interesting.
That's all. Having spent a lot of time with military folks, entering and exiting embassies and things like that with my work. I think that just gives you, you walk faster, you talk faster, you get to the point faster.
and right, which is a good thing. No one's time.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is a question for both of you. Has there been an unexpected room you found yourself in that has turned out to be the most useful?
Sean, you've been in lots of spaces. Let's hear yours.
I would say the most unexpected one was, I think this was about 12 years ago. A friend of mine convinced me to take a clown class. At this point, I had already been doing stand-up for about 10 years. And so I felt like I sort of felt like I knew what I was doing on stage. But the teacher I had an opportunity to study with was Philippe Gaulier, who actually just passed a few months ago. But in the world of clown, he's kind of considered the most famous clown teacher, certainly one of the two most famous clown teachers. So he's taught Roberto Benigni, Helena Bonham Carter, Sacha Baron Cohen, Emma Thompson, all these incredible people, and like thousands of other students around the world. And so I decided to just leap into this. It was, a room I was in for about 2 weeks studying with him. And he was probably the funniest person I've ever met. His form of teaching was basically to ask you to get on stage and improvise. And he would hold a big giant drum. And if at any moment he didn't like what you were doing, he would hit this drum and the scene would stop and he would single you out. He would ask all the other performers to get off the stage. And then he would just proceed to brutally mock you in front of all of the other students and tear apart the mistakes you had made, and why you were no longer being funny because of certain impulses you had. And in terms of comedy, it was by far the hardest thing I've ever done, like harder than any real show I've done. But I think I learned so much through that experience that applied in so many other areas of my life, like outside of performance, because in the end, it was really about learning to be comfortable with failure. that clowns live in failure and are willing to be laughed at as they're failing, that's actually kind of their purpose. And so, yeah, that was a particularly strange and beautiful room I was in for a couple of weeks.
That's really dope. Really cool. Wow. Yeah.
You've got a solid, strong ego, Sean. There's nothing fragile about you. If you can take that shit.
Get a drum, pounded off stage.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
Brishkay, what about you? Was there an unexpected room?
I've had lots of unexpected rooms. But one of the rooms that I'm very happy I stepped in, I realized I'll never, ever step into it again and got out the door as quickly as possible, was a news assignment desk at CTV many years ago. Yep, there was a point when I wanted to become a journalist, and spending a bit of time in that news assignment space just made me understand, no way. I am not committing myself to 5-minute breaking news stories for advertising dollars kind of a thing. You kind of just sense. It's just not like me to just get a story for 5 minutes and walk away from it and then move on to something else. So that was great. And then I would say the other room that really helped me was actually just spending a lot of time at the Bagram base in Afghanistan, because I kind of realized that the way, generals and soldiers and all these people, terrorists supposedly, are sort of like framed on TV is not really how they are. They're just, most people, no matter what their positions are just human beings who are just trying to get through their frickin' day and take care of some family or the other. And so I'm really happy that I learned that there's a beauty and humanity in every person, even the worst that we think. Like, I don't, so I'm happy that I witnessed and got close to people on the field there.
You got to see firsthand their realities and their stories.
Yes, rather than them being framed in the identity of soldier or general or this or terrorist, like human with a name, with a childhood.
Right. And a past. Yeah. Well, that actually leads us into our next question, and it kind of touches on stereotypes and narratives of people and assuming who they are. Specifically for you, Brishkay, your documentary work has consistently challenged, the dominant Western media narrative about Afghan women. And your scripted work has done the same thing through your drama. So in your experience, which lands harder when you're trying to, I guess, dismantle a deeply embedded political stereotype? Is it the documentary side, or would you say it's the scripted drama, or is it both?
No, it's definitely not both. For me, because I am a woman and a woman from Afghanistan, and in my earlier years, having access to Afghanistan made people here in Canada and the US sort of believe in me with that aspect and believe that I can deliver a story, and the stories that I would deliver are what they wanted anyway. So that's not a problem. Making documentary films about Afghan women, making documentary films about Iranian women, Indian women, in that region is not a problem at all. Fictionalizing them as women like women in the West, as I say, sluts, bitches, and whores, that's harder to accept. That's a little tougher. The fact that we can be strong and brazen and bold and provocative and demand things that any other woman in our Western society demands and gets it in ways that, are like Olivia Pope at Scandal, for instance, wants it. If she's that way, it is hard for people to be like, really, an Afghan woman? Would she? Yes, she would. Yes, she can.
Damn right she can.
Yeah. And if so, that's a little harder. But I think that is changing now. And I think, again, the streaming platforms opening the world of audiences, bringing in stories from other parts of the world, so we actually see them, hearing the different languages and seeing the nuance in our personalities and our identities. that's changing, but that's been hard. But I still stick with it, though. I mean, every protagonist I write is a good Afghan girl that wants to do something bad because of a good reason. Like, I'll still kind of go around that circle. And if they want to change her and make her a different nationality, I don't necessarily have an issue with it, but it has to be authentic to the motivation of the character, obviously.
And doesn't that touch so much on, racial profiling and stereotypes within film and TV, right? Whether it's, you could probably replace that for most people of color, especially women, that will get pocketed in one sort of how they're framed on TV, and then they can't pivot from anything else, right? So I love that.
And even the way we dress, I tend to dress a different way just because I am who I am. But it's being accepted outside of a version of you that has been recycled and commodified to sell news. Breaking up away from that is a challenge, but we're doing it.
Can you actually touch on that? Because an Afghan woman can look many different ways. Like she can look like you, but there's others that may like wear a head dress. Like how do you but to celebrate that in all forms? And it doesn't. Can you just speak more about that?
No, I mean I can. So I have this thing about cowboy boots, and when people know me, they know Brishkay wears shorts and Brishkay wears cowboy boots. I wear shorts because I was what you called a tomboy as a kid, messy, scrappy, whatever. I wore cowboy boots because when I wore my kitten heels and walked into the spaces where there were military officials, they would treat me as if I'm too dainty. And the moment I put on a pair of cowboy boots, we're even. We're good.
Love that.
And so I got used to that. But when I enter spaces and it's like, oh, I'm Brishkay, and they're like, oh, cowboy boots, shorts. She's an Afghan. I'm like, what? It really depends on how evolved this human being is in front of me. That's the way I look at it. And if they're a little taken back, I assume that's okay. Your evolution's a little slower. Let me get you up to speed. This is what we're gonna do.
But what about even connecting as women, like Afghan women, that may look a bit different and may live differently. Because I know
Well, I sell. Yeah, I mean, if it's in my recent NFB documentary, that's exactly it. It's 5 very different Afghan women, very different looks, different professions, different takes on life. And that film was purposely done was to open up our nuanced identity and to show people. So. Yeah, that's always a goal. And I'm also the kind of person where, yes, I'll wear my shorts and my boots or whatever, but standing next to me will be my Afghan sister in her hijab. And I love her and I will stand up for her. And she deserves to be dressed and be who she is.
Love that. Absolutely love that. Thank you for answering that.
Sean, do you ever get questions about your attire yourself?
Yeah, sometimes, especially if it's a disguise. But if it's a good disguise, nobody will notice. Yeah.
Sean, actually, a question for you. What is the single most, I would say, important structural change that would make politically charged or like kind of cross-forming filmmaking easier to get made in this country, in your opinion?
Yeah, so again, I mentioned it a bit earlier, and I think it might be a bit controversial to suggest, but there's still this insistence around the people on camera and whether they're Canadian citizens or not, and whether they're the central characters, and this exists through a lot of different parts of the Canadian funding streams. And so with the last film I made, again in the Philippines, I opted not to insert, fictional Canadian characters and to just film with people in the Philippines. And so that meant that there were previous Canadian funders I had worked with who could no longer fund that film. Some could, some no longer could. So that's one thing that I wish could be looked at and scrutinized a bit differently, because I do feel that I'm Canadian, and I do feel that that was a Canadian film, or at least it's a co-production. And I just think that we squeeze folks out and we miss out on really vital stories coming from people in diaspora when we choose to view those things as not quote unquote Canadian enough.
Wow. I think you totally hit on something there. I think it's, so often I think the power of the diaspora, first of all, is just not understood unless you have it and know it, and that someone, in, say, the UK is Filipino, but will watch a Canadian Filipino story. Like, yeah, but I can go on about that one. But I think you definitely hit on something, pretty important there. So maybe there needs to be a different, or maybe another lane for that kind of funding, right?
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, because I also, of course, I work with and love so many Canadian actors. So I understand from certain perspectives why these things exist. But that's a great way to look at it, Vanessa, I think, is maybe if there was just a different lane for that. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, Brishkay, what's your view on that, actually, before I move on?
Well, no, I mean, I think Sean is touching on something important because there is sort of this, like, it's like pre-geo-blocking story making in a sense, you know what I mean? So, yeah, I feel for you for that. I think this is changing, but obviously the second language question, I always find it odd when, like, for instance, when I write, like, there's always like an element of second language because this is Canada. And so you will have Afghan, Iranian, Syrian. The show is going to be English and a mix of languages as people interact. And I find it very odd when people say that, that might not work. Can we keep it just in English? And that's where I feel like my documentary side comes in very strong, which is that authenticity. It's like, really? But that Syrian family around the dinner table is not going to speak to each other in English. Like, they're just not. And you're going to lose the energy, the beauty, the colorfulness. So I hope that more and more Canadian content allows for 50% to include of diverse different languages within it, because that's how our society is. That's how we live. Like, it's Canada. It's a land of immigrants.
It's authentic. It's the truth. If you're going home, you're at work and you're speaking in English, but you're going home to your family that speaks another language. That's true. That's authentic. That's real.
Exactly. Or if I go into a grocery store, for instance, if it's an Afghan or Iranian store, I speak Farsi or Dari. I just do, and I speak Japanese. So if I go to a Japanese store, I'll speak in Japanese. Like, it's just...
That is such a good... Or if you're even... If the opposite, if you're not even speaking, like, say I go to Vesco all the time, like, it's a Chinese grocery store.
Yeah.
And if I'll see another person that speaks to the cash, in Mandarin, or like, I don't understand, but then I speak to them in English. Like, it's also very bilingual, and people switch in between languages, like, so yeah.
When we disconnect out of that, like out of that reality, when we show content that is outside of our really everyday lived experience, we just don't care.
And why are we afraid of that? I feel like that is our strength, and that's what makes our country so beautiful,
That's what I would say.
Well, I guess in the current Canadian broadcasting and streaming landscape, with the CRTC reforms and the new streaming obligations and like ongoing consolidation, where do you see the most real opportunity for work like yours over the next 5 years? So I don't know if you want to start with that. Where do you see it?
I feel it is with scripted. Maybe that's a bit naive. I'm hoping to just increasingly work more in the scripted space. I feel like right now what's happening online, specifically with the creator economy, is kind of disrupting and undermining a lot of what documentary has traditionally provided us, which is meant to be a view at the real world. I'm not saying that creators are necessarily doing what documentarians do, but I just think it's really changing audiences and their appetites for quote unquote reality. And so I think in some ways it's making scripted a higher value commodity. And I think there's more exciting opportunity there because of that.
Brishkay, your thoughts?
I think I'm like, when I'm looking at my next 5-year or 10-year kind of goal, looking at like what's happening in the industry, I know for sure that I'm going to continue doing my scripted work as a writer, maybe a producer as well, like getting more involved in that way. But documentary is still very close to my heart, and it's something that I will continue producing and directing. But I have no intention to direct series in Canada or America in general, because I don't agree with the hierarchical system of what goes on set, period. And when you come from a background in documentary filmmaking, I think, Sean, you'll understand why that hierarchy system that is in place, that's the Hollywood system of like how people are sort of stratified on a call sheet and things like that, it just doesn't jive with me. I don't mind that stratification or that class system when it comes to being in a writer's room or doing that together, but it feels punitive. Sorry, that's the word on set. I think that's the best way I can describe it.
Toxic, right?
So
it can kind of be. It's not even so much that there obviously needs to be some sort of what is the word, formalities, I guess, and and everyone's roles and position. But I would agree with you that sometimes I think that honestly that gets to some people's heads. And it becomes weird.
Yes.
And it's like we're all trying to get the work done. Yeah. We're all trying to get it made. Like, yes, let's just put our egos aside. But.
Yeah. And you know what? I'm old enough to know that I don't want to learn. I don't want to change people necessarily. So I'm just going to walk away from that. And I'll be a writer and a producer.
But what about you creating a set? Like, that's different, right?
Yes. Oh, of course. I mean, like the feature that I'm working on right now, my co-producer and our Belgian producer, that's our rule, right? We have 8-hour days. We have certain rules. That we're just not going to bend on. But you can do that in a feature film, an indie feature. It's a lot harder to get that kind of quality of life and comfort and on an equal level for people on a set for a TV series, even a Canadian TV series. I think the people in Canada still follow some of the bad Hollywood
rules. Definitely.
Yeah. So I just don't want to play that.
Totally understand. All right. So for looking for towards emerging filmmakers, that are maybe watching this, what is the most honest thing that you can tell them about this path and what it actually looks like? Brishkay, start with
Yeah. Oh my God. So because I was very lucky in the past year or so, and I've been in some good rooms, in like award ceremonies and things. And, you think about that, right? Like when you're like, and I've realized my advice would be just stick long enough. People drop out. People give up. I'm serious. It doesn't have to be your full-time job. It wasn't for mine, Even now, I still take up different work, right? Like all kinds of, I'll teach, I'll take up story editing, I'll assist on a set, like, you know what I mean? Things like that. But it just continue following your goal and your dream and know, like, once you know who you are, like as an artist, like what is it that you want to do? How do you want to do it? Just don't give up. That honestly, just don't give up. That's the only thing. And soon you'll step into rooms and you'll find people that were with you and you're all kind of rising up together and you're suddenly you're like, oh, I knew 5 people 2 years ago. Now I know 20. Oh my God. Now those people that, were my friends are winning and I'm cheering for them and they're doing great. And then they cheer for you. And it's just this just stick. Don't give up.
Love that.
Sean?
Yeah, I think a mentor of mine, Harshal Walia, has told me it's a marathon, not a sprint. That comes from, political organizing spaces where I was taught that, but I think it applies in the film industry. And in terms of being able to sustain yourself, totally agree with what you said there, Brishkay, of you need multiple skills because the thing you dream of doing is more likely than not going to pay the bills for maybe years, maybe a decade. And so, for many years I worked as an editor. I worked as a writer, and being able to do those things allowed me to kind of stay in the industry, even if it wasn't exactly what I wanted to be doing, like directing my own scripts. But having those other skills can allow you to, stay in it. And then I think the other thing too is just if the thing that's motivating you is sort of like fame and, recognition, just, it's not to say that, of course everyone has an ego. We're all excited to be recognized and that sort of thing. But it's just really hard to ride it out for the long haul, based on that as your sole or primary motivation, because more likely than not, you're not going to get the kind of fame and recognition that your ego might crave. And so you really have to be able to find meaning in just the work itself, like some profound meaning that you get from just doing the work, regardless of the fruit that it yields. And you need to be able to sustain yourself from something there, whatever that is for you.
That is such a good point. So it's that you both make. So it's that sustaining yourself, financially by having those other skill sets, but also sustaining yourself in terms of feeding that, what feeds you to keep going, like emotionally and in your soul. Yeah, it's beautiful. All right, last question. We're a few weeks away from Banff, which is very exciting. It's going to be a great time. I'm excited to be with you guys all in the Rockies. But what are you hoping to achieve when you get to Banff? And Brishkay, we'll start with you.
Well, first of all, I'm really excited to actually see people like Sean and stuff face to face. So that's going to be great. Like connecting with this cohort, that's going to be superb. I've been to Banff before. I'm really looking forward to building some connections for my series State of Play. I have another political thriller, Tribunal, get my docs in front of some distributors. I've never ever looked to have conversations with agents, but it's something I'm going to consider this year. So just, really just, building connections, really. It's not about deals. It's about building connections and then coming out of it and then, being like, oh, those people were great. I really connected with them. Let's have a further conversation about whatever it was that we discussed and they're interested in. So, yeah.
All right. And Sean, for you?
Yeah. Similar, definitely just meeting the rest of the cohort. This conversation, Brishkay, makes me very excited to talk to you, including about some very specific projects. So that could be really exciting.
Nice.
And then I'm at a place now where in our slate, a lot of the projects we've been developing or that I've personally been writing are very much genre based projects, which is a bit of a new stage for me. And so I'm really excited to meet folks who are interested in, high concept genre things. A lot of them involve comedy, but also, of course, political influence, which is snuck in there a bit. So, looking for folks with those particular appetites.
Fantastic. All right. Well, those of you that are watching and that are coming, to Banff, you've heard it straight from Brishkay and Sean about, what they're hoping to do and achieve and meet with. And if you're, one of those people, please reach out to them on BanffXchange and you can arrange a meeting there or find them at Banff. Either way, or get in touch with me and I can connect you with them. But yes, thank you so much, Brishkay and Sean, for your time today.
Thank you, Vanessa.
Thank you, Vanessa and Anthony and Sean. I'll see you at Banff, and I'll see you, Vanessa, in Banff too. It's going to be great.
This episode of the DOV Elevate Podcast is presented by Playback and is an extension of the Diversity of Voices Fellowship presented by Banff World Media Festival. If you're a mid to established level producer, director, or writer who identifies as Black, Indigenous, or a person of color, the Diversity of Voices Elevate program was built for you. DOV Elevate connects exceptional Canadian screen industry talent to the global stage through Banff World Media Festival. Pitch your projects, meet the decision makers, accelerate your career, elevate your voice. Learn more at BanffMediaFestival.com. All links mentioned in this episode are provided in the description below for video and in the show notes for audio.